Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's Energon Universe discussion video, we're going over Transformers number 5. And I'm excited to cover this one because there are some fairly noteworthy things to go over here. There are nice character moments, surprising reveals, frenetic action, and just downright cool stuff. If you followed along with my videos for the previous issues, then you know I've been enjoying this series and I'm feeling pretty positive towards it overall. But issue 5 might be my favorite of all the issues released so far. We're barreling full speed ahead towards the end of the first arc, and judging by the events that unfold during this issue, it's gonna be a big one. So let's get into it. It feels weird to say that everything picks up in this issue when we've so far had a series that's been so crammed full of over-the-top action sequences, but I really do think it has picked up. Maybe not with the action specifically, but more in the sense of where this story and the larger universe is headed. And that's achieved by ratcheting up the conflict between the Autobots and the Decepticons. Issue 4 took a real humdinger of an unexpected turn, with Optimus replacing his lost arm with Megatron's fusion cannon still attached, looking to go on the offensive. After a suggestion by Sparkplug, the Autobots set up shop at a nearby dam, where we learn that Wheeljack has been restored, or at least halfway restored, with Ratchet only having enough resources to reactivate the upper body of the Autobot scientist. I know a few of you have been waiting for this character's return, so I imagine you'll be happy to see him here, or at least halfway happy. But even as a torso hooked up to some kind of mechanical lift thing, Wheeljack is able to massively turn the tide in the Autobots' favor, doing his usual thing and whipping up a device of the week, in this case a turbine to draw hydroelectric power from the dam. This in turn gives the Autobots the power they need to get Jazz back on his feet, which will probably make even more of you pretty happy, as it was unclear when we'd see him again after his showstopper of an introduction in the previous issue. We also finally see RC appear in this issue, and she's revived at the Farmingham Dam, which means she was on board the Ark when it crashed on Earth. I was wondering how they would introduce this character, specifically whether she'd come from off-world with her Cybertronian alt mode, but it seems like she was maybe reformatted into an Earth mode here, though I'm not totally sure. As I've said before, I don't know much about cars, so I'm not sure if this is based on some real-world car or not. It certainly doesn't look like any car I've ever seen, so if you know, feel free to chime in here, but regardless, I think it's a cool-looking car. I dig this new alt mode for RC. Little stuff like that helps freshen up the heavy G1 influence on display in this series, and I'm all for that, personally. But there's more significance to this sequence than just adding to the Autobot ranks. In this panel, Wheeljack speculates that if his turbine works, it won't just help the Autobots, but it'll provide power for the entire town of Farmingham for a decade. I feel like this fairly low-key conversational sequence demonstrates the impacts of the Transformers being on Earth more clearly than any of the other crazy stuff we've seen in previous issues. Really helps illustrate and emphasize the idea that Earth will never be the same again. This is no doubt going to play into the Energon universe as a whole in the accompanying G.I. Joe series, and it gives a lot of weight to the potential inherent in Cybertronian technology and Energon being in play on Earth. Potential that's driving Cobra Commander's quest in his own series. We'll see where things go from here, but I think this is a pretty clear indicator that Earth will be experiencing some major changes as this continuity moves forward. But the Autobots aren't the only ones who remedy their energy problems and bolster their ranks. The Decepticons have used Skywarp to power up Teletran 1 by kind of horrifically building him into the computer. When I say horrifically, I mean horrifically awesome, because I really like the way this new computer looks. Skytran? Telewarp? I don't know, we gotta workshop that a little more. This thing is pretty gnarly looking, with Skywarp just being an armless torso built into this panel, with the little repair thingamabob from issue number 1 attached to his head via this bar that looks to be grafted on. The whole thing is given a sort of glowing effect with the orange rather than black outlines, which is a nice little touch. And as a quick aside, this round doohickey is pretty accurate to the cartoon imagery with Teletran 1 that appeared more than a few times, but it got a good amount of focus in the episode Heavy Metal War from season 1, so, you know, That's neat. I was hesitant to count Skywarp as being truly dead last issue, and I still am after reading number 5. I really think he could still be alive, and maybe just comatose or something? I don't know. Starscream's line saying that Skywarp volunteered his life for the greater Decepticon good is making it hard to be optimistic about the Seeker's chances, but then again, the whole statement is couched in a lie, as Skywarp didn't volunteer for anything. In any case, I'm still holding off on adding him to the tally until I see something more definitive. I saw a number of comments about why the Decepticons used Skywarp when there were other deactivated Decepticons around, and look, I get it. It's not a big enough deal for me to take me out of the story, but I can understand where you're coming from if it bothers you. I'm not sure if it'll ever be addressed in the comic, but I'm wondering if Skywarp being functional at the time of his, sacrifice is why Starscream and Soundwave did what they did. We may never know, but the fact that the Seeker is integrated so extensively into the console makes me wonder if that might be the explanation. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Starscream and Soundwave are just a couple of dicks. Anyway, Skywarp's old news. There are new toys now, like Thundercracker, Frenzy, and apparently a single Reflector. Reflector is typically composed of 3 separate bots who combine, transforming into a single alternate mode, a camera, a detail that seems to have been changed for the Skybound continuity. Regardless, the newly refortified Decepticon forces depart for the dam for a showdown with the Autobots, leaving the Ark in this very kick-ass panel with Thundercracker mid-transformation and Soundwave doing the classic Superman flying pose from the G1 cartoon. I really like the angle here and the arrangement of the 3 main Decepticons and the contrast between the smooth lines of the rock and rubble of the mountain and the greebles and intense tech details of the Ark. Pretty tasty stuff. The showdown at the dam is a nice sequence. It calls to mind the battle at Sherman Dam in the More Than Meets the Eye miniseries from the G1 cartoon without repeating anything from it directly. So it's new, but feels very classic Transformers, if you know what I mean. And in this battle, things really turn around for the Autobots, where Optimus puts his new arm to shockingly effective use, completely obliterating Reflector and mercifully sparing us from any more of the Decepticons' terrible photography puns and punchlines. Frenzy and Rumble sustain some pretty serious and potentially fatal injuries during this fight, but I'm holding off on them for now because they could have survived, right?
You okay, bro?
But there are some I'll definitely add to the tally from the start of the issue, though I would say even that's kind of tricky for reasons I'll get into shortly. But right away, I think updating the human body count is simple enough where we can add 4 soldiers. And the reason I'm saying 4 instead of 5 is because these opening pages have this cool bit of identical framing and composition, and yeah, you see it. I don't need to explain it to you. And this Autobot falling right here is supposed to be Perceptor. We'll get to the coloring in a moment. And a couple panels down, we see Prime mourning him at the bottom of the page, so it stands to reason that the human analog for Perceptor in the panel above is the one Sparky is mourning in an identical gesture, which leads me to a total of 4. Now, tallying the Autobot deaths here becomes a bit more challenging because 2 of them are back up and running around, Jazz and Cliffjumper. And this one that I think is Jazz, you could make a case for this being Prowl, but I don't know, man. The shape of the gun and the coloring at the shoulder, not to mention the lack of a tire on the shoulder, really makes it seem like this is Jazz rather than Prowl. Anyway, the problem here is one that was present in the 1986 movie, which is that, short of being reduced to ashes, it's hard to pin down what exactly constitutes a fatal injury for a Transformer. And so it's possible that Cliffjumper and Jazz were not fatally injured here, in which case maybe the human soldiers occupying the same positioning in Sparkplug's flashback were also not fatally wounded. But we're doing the best we can here with what we've got, and that's all we can do for now. Regardless of whether or not they were fatal injuries, Jazz and Cliffjumper are back now, so there's no need to count them. I feel good about counting Blaster and Perceptor as being dead, though, so let's go ahead and add them, shall we? So you may have noticed I was referring to Cliffjumper here, but this bot, who is definitely based on Cliffjumper's character model due to the chest and the head, is wearing Bumblebee's color scheme. And there's a whole potential can of worms here with the different color variations of G1 Cliffjumper that were released in different countries during the 80s, combined with Cliffjumper's mention of his clan last issue. But I think this is simply an error. We've seen background characters miscolored already with the pile of Autobots in issue number 2, and there's another mistake on this same page in issue 5. The aforementioned Perceptor is given Red Alert's color scheme, and later on, we see Trailbreaker miscolored as Beachcomber, so this being an error seems likely. And this is probably the biggest thing I'd like to see addressed moving forward with this series. It's not a huge deal, but I still think this is definitely an area for improvement, and hopefully they get there. But when background characters being colored incorrectly is my biggest complaint, I think that says quite a bit. But there's one more moment here that deserves a shout out. In the solicitation for this issue, we were told that Starscream revives one of the most powerful Decepticons, and the alternate cover, as well as how Reflector is presented in this issue, ended up being a bit of a fake-out. I saw a few of you put forth Devastator as a possibility, and what can I say other than you totally called it? The introduction of the Constructicons took me off guard in the best possible way. I had the biggest, dumbest grin on my face after I flipped the page and saw Long Haul crashing into Optimus, with the heavy metal text, I guess, functioning as the sound of the collision, maybe? As well as, of course, referencing the G1 cartoon Heavy Metal War, where the Constructicons made their first appearance. The Constructicons are one of my favorite combiner teams, with their combined form of Devastator forever immortalized in the nostalgia centers of my brain, thanks to his unforgettably badass role in the attack on Autobot City during the 1986 animated movie. The Constructicons only appear in the final 3 pages of this issue, but man, they are used exceptionally well in that brief time. I really love how Johnson played this, leading us to believe that the Autobots were finally getting a foothold to make a comeback, only to tear it all away and put them in an even more perilous situation. And this is accomplished with a clever and inventive use of the Constructicons' vehicle forms, something I feel like I haven't seen nearly enough of in Transformers fiction, with the most brutal being Scavenger slicing through Ratchet's leg with his shovel. We also get this awesome panel with all 6 members of the team looking very cool in Johnson's signature style before they merge into Devastator, setting the stage for what I'm hoping will be a face-melting conclusion to the first arc. Needless to say, I'm pretty pumped. I wasn't expecting to see combiners so soon. Not complaining though. Like I said earlier, issue 5 is my favorite in the series so far. For better or worse, the series started off very much rooted in the G1 cartoon, and really, it still is in a lot of ways. I know there are plenty of fans who were sick of G1 or don't like the cartoon, but personally, I think there's still quite a bit of potential in drawing from that source. It all comes down to how it's handled and where the creative teams take it. Now we're getting into the point where we're starting to see some imaginative and weird stuff, along with some fresh ideas applied to that classic formula. Optimus taking Megatron's arm was a big one. My hope is that we continue to see more and more of that sort of thing, and the Skybound identity, whatever that ultimately ends up being, continues to assert itself and develop its own idiosyncrasies. Things are escalating quickly, especially now that Wheeljack and Teletran 1 are back in play, so I'm hoping we're going to go to some unexpected places. But I guess we'll just have to see. By the way, how cool is it that we get to see Optimus in his alt mode with Megatron's arm attached, with the fusion cannon forming a kind of oversized smokestack. If any third-party companies want to jump in here, I definitely would not say no to a toy of this. But that's it from me on this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the video and this issue. How'd you feel about the Devastator reveal? Or how Reflector and Frenzy got wrecked shortly after their introduction? Don't forget to hit the thumbs up if you liked the video, as well as the subscribe button if you want to follow along with future videos. A big thank you to those of you who have stuck with me so far, watching, commenting, sharing. All of it is very much appreciated. There will be more Energon universe coverage in the pipeline, and I'm plugging away on the next IDW retrospective video as well. There's definitely more coming, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.